Hey everybody, how you doing? I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and you saw this week there was it was one of those moments where every now and then you get an opportunity to be a part of something where you really feel like you're helping to shape history for the better. You're helping to do something for your community that will help children that are even unborn. And this week there was an interesting controversy going on in the state of Kentucky that involved all white juries versus more diverse juries. And Judge Olu Stevens was the man that was at the center of all of this. He made a ruling that led to a lot of controversy, and I like to believe that he came out victorious. And I also was eager to get a chance to speak to him so that you can kind of hear it right from the judge's mouth in terms of just who he is and how he thinks and all these other things. So without further ado, I want to say hello to my brother Judge Olu Stevens. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, boys. How are you?
I'm doing really well, really well. Well, first and foremost, I know that when we talked before, and I want everybody to know this, we're not legally allowed to go into the particulars of the case, and we're not really here to do that. We're not here to go bashing at anybody or anything like that. This is all about positivity and knowledge and understanding. But I have to say, congratulations. They reinstated you back to the bench. Things seem to be back to normal. Is that the case?
Well, we're getting there. Today was the first day back, and it was a wonderful experience. It was great to be back on the bench, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to thank you for what you did and all the work that you did. And I will say that I believe there was a real possibility that you'd be talking to me and I'd be unemployed right now if it wasn't for Boyce Watkins
Wow.
and the work that you did and others did on my part. And I'm very appreciative.
Well, I'm honored and humbled that you said that. When people ask me why I was involved, and it's funny when it all kind of started. I didn't know you personally, and people said, well, do you know this guy? Has he called you? Have you talked to him? And this is before we'd even talked, and I said, actually, he doesn't have to talk to me. He doesn't have to thank me. He doesn't even have to like me. I said, I said because number one. We should stand up for each other when we're doing the right thing. That's the first thing. Too many of us suffer when others don't come to their aid. It really goes back to the plantation. That's why they could torture one of us and the rest of us will sit back and watch it happen. That day's gone. And then number two, I always made it clear, and I think you'll agree with me on this, that this was bigger than just a situation about one judge or one situation. It's really all about the bigger issue, about just seeking out justice in our justice system. And
That's right.
that was so to me it was very simple. It was very easy to dodge all the crazy politics because I said it's all about right and wrong. We know that diverse juries are better than non-diverse juries. Every study shows this. The judge was standing up for this. He had the authority to make this ruling. It was real simple for me. So as we go into that, I want to ask you, just speaking on that issue of jury diversity, how important is that in terms of making sure our juries aren't just non-reflective of the community at large?
Mhm. Well, it's central. It's central to everything that we do. I think from the vantage point of the defendant, it's very important to have a diverse jury, particularly African American defendants. And in Louisville, um, African Americans represent 21% of the population, but represent 55% of the jail population. The numbers are are really disproportionate when it comes to that, and we need to make sure that our juries are diverse from the perspective of the jurors themselves. Everybody has a right to serve, and no one should be excluded on the basis of their race or their gender. We need to make sure that we've got number one, folks in the pool, and then number two, making sure that they actually make it onto panels and therefore have a legitimate shot at making it onto the jury. And what this issue, central to this issue, is the issue of the composition, the racial composition of our jury panels. And I think it's very important that we make sure that our panels are diverse, so that we can reach the point in time where folks can be questioned and make it onto juries. We talk about Batson And I saw the talk yesterday about that. But before we reach Batson, before we reach the issue of jurors being discriminated against, we need to make sure that there are jurors in the pool, black jurors, and in this case, black jurors in the pool to begin with. Because if they're not, then the issue of Batson is really a moot issue. There are no jurors to protect on the basis of race. So that's what this particular issue is all about.
Mm. So I think that a lot of people may not understand that, that just that process. When you talk about jurors of color being discriminated against, you'll see all people, including those who are opposed to you, who will go into the community and say, we need more diverse jury pools and things like that. We need you to come in for jury duty. But then you have people, in the community, myself included, for example, Dr. Chanel Jones and I joked about this. I said, I know that I would never make it to I can't imagine myself being selected to be part of a jury for, the trial of an African American, right? Dr. Jones said the same thing with me, and we're law-abiding citizens. We don't, we've never hurt anybody. Where does the discrimination come into play? That keeps so many black people from getting a chance to serve as part of a jury.
Well, there's been a lot of talk recently about juror summons and responding to juror summons, and that's always been an issue that people should, when they get a jury summons, they should make sure they actually go to jury duty. But that's a problem that runs across racial lines. You get white people get jury summons and they don't go. Black people get jury summons and they don't go. The more people that respond to the jury summons and actually appear for the jury pool, the better, obviously. But that's one issue, and that's a constant issue that we're constantly working on. But this issue relates to what's that actual jury panel supposed to look like? I call up out of 220, 250 jurors or whatever that appear every 2 weeks. For any particular trial, I'll call up 41 jurors. And the question is, if when I say I call up, I call jury pool and say, send me 41 jurors. And they send me 41 jurors, and the majority of them, or all of them, are white, and there are no black jurors. And then I get a motion, because that's the key. There's a lot of talk about what I did, and there's a misunderstanding about it. I didn't just look at a jury and say, hey, they're all white, and send them back. I can't do that, because if I did that and the defendant was convicted, well, I'd have to try the case over again, because the first thing the defendant would say is Stevens got rid of my jury. I wanted that jury and he got rid of it and they convicted me. So I have to wait for a motion to be filed. And that's what happened in this instance. There was a motion made by the defendant, and I considered that and sustained that. So that's what caused. That was the beginning, at least, of the issue. And obviously, can't get into it, but that's what sets it up. What does that panel look like, and whether or not the judge has discretion to essentially dismiss the panel on a motion by the defendant.
Okay. Okay. Your Honor, one of the things I want to ask you about is and it's funny, you when you and I talk, you probably I'm sure you'd probably correct me if I called you Your Honor in private conversation, but I enjoy calling a black man Your Honor. Forgive me, this y'all who everybody watching, I just enjoy this because I have a lot of respect for this brother. But so I want to ask you this. You know, it may be, and you can answer it to the extent you feel comfortable. As you're kind of watching this, I know you couldn't be directly involved in all the stuff that was happening. In fact, a lot of it was happening, outside of your knowledge. It certainly was outside of your scope. I mean, there were people independently jumping behind the issue because they identified with the issue. Some people didn't even know you; they just identified with the issue. What goes through your mind as you're kind of watching this? You weren't able to go to work for a while, and you're kind of watching all this happen. What were you kind of thinking? What were you hoping would kind of come out of all this?
Well, I love what I do, and it's been a hard time personally over the last few weeks about what has happened, and then not being able to go to work. And technically speaking, what happened was that as a result of everything, my cases were kind of just stayed. I wasn't ever removed from my position officially, but effectively, because my cases were stayed, I was not able to really hear them. Because had I heard them and then a decision was reached adverse to me, then that would call into question every ruling that I made in the interim, and really would render those rulings null and void. And so that would create a very big problem. So effectively, I was removed for the time for about a week or so, and that was a very tough time. But as you mentioned at the inception, there's something about people standing up for you and seeing that really strengthens you and encourages you. And I'm fortunate because my position is high profile enough where something like this happens and people rally. And in this case, with you getting involved and others all over the country, all over the world, really, we're getting communications from all parts of the world on this. It was something that was very uplifting for me during this period of time. It was extremely helpful, and I was so appreciative of all of the efforts that people made. Some of the people I saw were out there in the middle of the night protesting. Boyce Watkins was in Louisville with his bullhorn in the streets, shutting it down, and that was for me personally so gratifying to see, but and so encouraging. It really strengthened me and made me want to continue doing what I'm doing.
Well, it was awesome to be a part of that, and I can say that um, I played my tiny part, but I will say that there were so many people, young people, activists from Black Lives Matter and other places that were out there, and it wasn't like they were out there on a bright sunny day. Some of those nights it was cold, it was raining, it was windy. They were very consistent, and I love that because I think that when we showed just that level of conviction, that level of organization, that level of commitment to doing the right thing. I think people did take notice of that because it wasn't as if you could argue that they had no reason to be out there. They weren't arguing for any kind of preferential treatment. They just wanted a piece of equity. In fact, there's that study at Duke University you may be familiar with that shows that when you just add one black juror to a panel, the results are much different from what they were before. And so it's not as if people are saying we want half the juries to be black or we want 20 or 30%. We just want one or two, and that would be enough. So why do you think that some people would be so resistant to simply pushing for justice in the justice system? I mean, how could someone vilify you for simply making that ruling, which for many of us just comes off as common sense?
Mhm. Well, and I don't know. I can't really talk about the particulars of that case and what the motivations were, but I think one would say from their perspective that there's a legitimate question about the application of law as it relates to the selection of our juries, and there's a legitimate legal issue as to whether or not a judge has discretion to, upon a motion of the defendant, set aside an entire jury panel for lack of racial diversity. That is considered to be, and that is a legal question. But as you often say, there's there are legal questions, and then there are things that can be answered by simply asking the question: is it right or is it wrong? And I believe that fundamentally that this is an issue of right and wrong. Are our juries going to be representative of our community? Are they going to be diverse racially, ethnically? That's an important thing, and you've cited some of the studies, the Duke study, and other things, but fundamentally, everyone has a right to serve, and no one should be discriminated against. That's Batson, and then no one should be excluded from jury panels, and on the and a particular race should not be excluded, and that's really the essence of the fight here. That again, you know, you've got to be in the pool in order to make it to the point where you enjoy the protections that Batson provides. If you're not in the pool, then Batson really doesn't apply. If you got 50 jurors and they're all white, then we need not get into issues of Batson because there's nobody in the pool to protect. And that's what is at the essence of this particular fight. The answer to some would say the answer is, oh well, go to jury duty. Black people don't go to jury duty. That's a separate issue. I agree that's an issue, but that's an issue for everyone across the board, and it doesn't address the issue of let's say, the black defendant who's looking out at a jury panel of all white people, and makes a motion and says, "I'm concerned that they're not any individuals that look like me on the panel, Judge," and lays out a case for setting aside the panel. The question is, should the judge, in my mind, the last line of defense, the person who is responsible for maintaining this proceeding and maintaining the fairness of the proceeding, should the judge be able to consider that motion? And should the judge be able to grant that motion under certain circumstances? And obviously, my opinion is that the judge should be able to do that. That's part of what the judge is charged with, is making sure that the proceedings are fair to everyone. And so I think that's part of the fundamental purpose, and that's part of the job of the judge.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Batson versus Kentucky. The famous case, which again, I'm not an attorney, but from what I understand, it was that it was a significant ruling that had to do with not discriminating against jurors on the basis of race. When that ruling was made, Justice Thurgood Marshall, who voted with the majority, and I'm looking here in the New Yorker on this, and he voted with the majority, but he actually warned that the ruling wouldn't solve the problem of racism in the jury selection process. And in fact, actually, in 1987, there was a training video that became public from Jack McMahon, an assistant district attorney in Philadelphia, who told all the new prosecutors, quote, "When you do have a black jury, you question them at length. And on this little sheet that you have, mark something down that you can articulate later. You may want to ask more questions of those people, so it gives you more ammunition to make an articulable reason as to why you're striking them, not for race." And then later on, it seems that they're in the legal community, from what I've read. Again, I'm not an attorney here, just an armchair lawyer for half a second.
Yeah, right now though.
All right, well, hey, let me go ahead and just do my little spiel then. In fact, in 1996, there was an Illinois appellate judge who basically said, "quote." The charade that he called it, quote, the charade that has become the Batson process. And what he said is that many prosecutors were literally cataloging different reasons, just flimsy reasons to strike jurors in a way that would be defined as race neutral. And the things they listed here were too old, too young, living alone, living with a girlfriend, overeducated, lack of maturity, unemployed, employed as a barber, etc. And the judge actually joked that new prosecutors are given a manual, probably entitled "Handy Race Neutral Explanations" or 20-time tested race neutral explanations for eliminating a jury. Can you speak to some of this in terms of the effectiveness of Batson in eliminating the racism in the jury selection process?
Well, it's a very good question, and it's obviously an involved question. Um, I think, and I've dealt with a number of Batson issues, and again, what we're talking about now is a different issue than what I am facing, or at least the issue that has caused the national attention. That this issue of Batson comes after the issue that we've been dealing with here. And it reaches what we refer to as peremptory strikes or discretionary strikes that lawyers make on the jury panel. That those strikes can be made for any reason that's not discriminatory in nature. You can't discriminate on the basis of race, gender, ethnicity. That's what Batson and the progeny stands for. Batson itself talks about race discrimination only. But later cases that have developed, that are still in the Batson line, have extended the Batson rationale to gender and to ethnicity. Um, what I would say is to some of the things that are said, because the perception is that Batson doesn't have teeth. Okay, that essentially you can offer anything, any silly reason, and sustain and that would be considered a race neutral reason for having eliminated the juror. So if you're challenged on it and you're asked for a race neutral reason, you can give anything, and the courts accept it, and that's kind of the perception of Batson. I disagree with that, just because I have presided over a ton of these trials and entertained all kind of Batson issues, read countless number of cases involving Batson, and I think um, that the key is really to take very detailed notes during the course of the trial. I am constantly taking notes about whatever anybody is saying of any race, and I'm marking down things that are said, because if a Batson issue arises later, I want to be able to evaluate it. And really, some of the things that you mentioned, and you made some very good points. Some of the things that you mentioned, though, the question is whether or not those things apply to white jurors who are allowed to remain on the jury. And to the extent that they do, then that's a pretty big indicator that it's not a race neutral reason. It's a pretext for something else. So if you say something about somebody's age, for instance, but you've left people of the same age that are white on the jury, then I begin to question whether or not that's truly the reason. So obviously, what that requires is for you to be paying attention as the trial judge. I know I've got to constantly be paying attention. I've got to have some pretty detailed notes about what people of all races on that jury panel are saying, what their backgrounds are, everything. Because if a Batson challenge is made, and I do turn to the to one side, usually the Commonwealth, for a race neutral reason, then I've got to be able to evaluate that and make sure that that's not pretext. And if I determine that it's pretextual, then it's likely that I'm going to sustain the Batson challenge. And what happens is, essentially, if I sustain it, that juror who was struck is put back into the jury pool and considered once again for the jury.
Okay. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read one more quote, but then I want to ask you one more question before I let you get back to your busy day. You're working, man. You got things to do. I want to quote Stephen Bright, the president of the Southern Center for Human Rights. He was involved in a case that actually went to the Supreme Court in 2008, and he says that he's speaking of Batson. He says that in his opinion, it just makes a farce of the system. He said, nobody, the judge, the prosecutors, the defense lawyers, nobody thinks that the reasons are really the reasons that they strike people. They strike people because of their race. I mean, we all know that. And then you try to come up with a good reason for doing it, and you see if you can get away with it. So you're asking the judge to say that the prosecutor intentionally discriminated on the basis of race and that he lied about it. He said that's a very difficult psychology for the average judge. So actually, I said one more question, but actually there is two. Based on sort of hearing this, we know your efforts as a judge to really consider race in terms of how justice is administered. Do you feel that your colleagues are equally conscientious on this kind of thing? I mean, can we look to every judge to kind of think the same way, or what's sort of the variation there?
Well, I think, in answer to your question, can you look to every judge to think the same way? Absolutely not. You can't. Their laws and their uniform, but application, interpretation varies. So it just, it's one of those situations, I think, that really depends on a lot of things. Your background, how sensitive you are to this issue. I've read a whole lot on Batson. I've written an article, a lengthy article on Batson a few years back. And I think it's very important, as far as Batson issues are concerned, to really evaluate the responses that are given. I don't. I think Batson has enough teeth where I don't have to accept an answer like somebody wasn't paying attention. If somebody wasn't paying attention, I advise lawyers all the time, if you see someone is not paying attention, then I need you to come up and tell me that that person is not paying attention at the time you see them so that I can personally observe it. Now, I don't have to actually observe it, but it's easier for them to make the case later that the person wasn't paying attention if they've already noted it somewhere along the line. But to bring it up for the first time after the questioning is over with to say, hey, that person wasn't paying attention, well, that just if nobody's seen it, that just doesn't seem that's disingenuous. It seems disingenuous. So there's certain safeguards that I think you can put in, and certain interpretations of Batson, and I'm sure my interpretation may be different from others, but mine is I think it has teeth. I think it can be enforced. Can it be improved? Yeah, it can be improved. And there's law out there to say, yeah, that any reason, for instance, can be accepted, and it doesn't have to be rational or something like that. But generally speaking, if you ask for a race neutral reason, I want something that's race neutral. I don't want to hear something that applies to other people that you left on the jury, and to me, that's the important analysis. And to the extent that it does apply, then I'm be very suspicious as to whether or not that's a truly a race neutral reason. But I'll say this, though, boys, getting back to all this, this is um, these are the kind of inquiries that we want to reach at some point. But the important thing is to make sure that we've got jurors in the pool to begin with, um, who can avail themselves of the protections of Batson. Batson is a line of is Batson and its line of cases were created for a reason, to make sure discrimination, um, that people are not discriminated against in the selection in the exercise of peremptory strikes. But I don't think it was intended um, that Batson and its line of cases would be mooted or negated by a kind of stealthy form of discrimination where black people are excluded from the pool to begin with. Now it's kind of okay. We reached in there randomly and we got 40, 50 white people and no black people. Well, that's okay because it was random. It's not okay. It's not okay for the African American defendant who is asking and saying, hey, look, where's my diverse jury panel? It's not okay for the African American juror who is on the outside looking in on that particular trial. Those individuals, the juror and the defendant, they have rights too, and they're very important, and they need to be enforced. And when you're talking about enforcing interpretation and then enforcement of law, there's somebody in the courtroom that wears a black robe that's responsible for that. And I try to take responsibility for that. That's my job. That's the way I see it. And when somebody asks me to address it, and I think it needs to be addressed and is in the interest of justice, and justice is fairness, then that's my job. And I do it, and I intend to keep doing it.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. Yeah, obviously from my perspective, I said I never understood the idea of a judge being challenged or even punished for simply doing his job and pursuing actual justice and fairness. And it almost comes off to me that what you went through is it's one of those situations that can be compared to kind of like maybe some things that people went through in the 60s and and whatnot, where at the time maybe there were a lot of people who said we don't understand why these people are doing this and why they're making trouble and things like that. But then 20, 30 years later you look back and they're on the right side of history. And I definitely feel that the work that you did, the choice that you made, was is definitely on the right side of history. I think you made history in the state of Kentucky, and I want to say thank you for that. Now, I want to ask you this. Now, this is kind of a last little fun question. I probably should have asked this at the beginning, but everybody all around the world, people all around the world, were watching you and seeing how you responded to this, and you responded with class and dignity, and I think people became intrigued by you. So I want to know, who is Judge Olu Stevens? I know you're a Morehouse man. I know you went to law school. Tell me about your background. Where you from, and just your influences, things like that.
Well, good question. I'm from Washington D.C. I was born in D.C. I grew up in Maryland, Potomac, Maryland, Silver Spring, Maryland, and moved here to Louisville, Kentucky, this area, almost 20 years ago. My wife is from this area. I met her. She's a Spelman graduate. And we moved here almost 20 years ago and have two children. And my son is at Morehouse, and my daughter's at Spelman right now. And so, this is my adopted home. Louisville is my adopted hometown. I love it here. We raise our children here. Um, it's interesting because in Kentucky we have 95 across the Commonwealth, 95 Kentucky circuit judges. Um, by my count and estimation, 94 of them are from Kentucky or grew up in Kentucky. So yeah. So my views may be shaped by my background. I come from a different place. Maybe that's part of it. Um, and I was fortunate to get here and meet a number of people and have a number of opportunities early. And I got appointed to the circuit bench when I was 38, and that was 7 years ago. Um, and I was elected after that by the people in Louisville by over 40,000 votes in 2010, and then reelected unopposed last year for an 8-year term. So, I'm very proud of the work I've done here. When we as judges, you make decisions, and in the nature of decision by a judge, somebody's asking you to do something, and somebody's asking you to do something else, and you weigh it and you make the best decision you can. And sometimes people are unhappy with it, but that's the nature of the beast. That's what we do, and I love my job, and I love to do it. I love to go there every day and work for the people that elected me to the position. So it's really a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. I'll tell you this before we end this. I just have to thank you once again. This is the first interview really I've ever done. It really is. I did one interview one time. I got kind of roped into it, and I wouldn't really knew it was an interview till it actually was. But if the local folks, when they see this, they're not going to be happy because they've been calling. They call all the time saying, "Oh, we want to talk," and Judge Stevens doesn't give interviews. I don't talk to the press. But this issue is that important. That it requires that I get out in front of it when I can. And with all the stuff going on, I haven't been able to talk. But now, with some of it at least resolved, some of it, then I can talk on limited subjects. And but I can certainly talk on this issue because this issue is vital. And I believe this issue is the most important issue facing our criminal justice system: the racial composition of our jury panels and our juries. There is nothing, in my opinion, more important than this. And so that's why I've decided to speak. And if I was going to speak, Boyce Watkins is going to be the first person I speak to. And I'm happy. I'm happy about that. And I appreciate everything you've done.
Well, brother, I'm honored that you came out and spoke to us. It was my pleasure to support you. I always talk to people about the fact that there's something that happens to a lot of us, meaning people of color, when we get positions of power, and you're dealing with this system, and even when you know that something's being done wrong, sometimes it's hard to have the courage to stand up against it. And I think that what I identified with is, and it's funny you talk about, being a judge and people want you to make one person want you to make one decision, the other person want you to make the other. I said, oh, it sounds a lot like being a parent, right? Or even a teacher. I remember just being in the classroom going through that. But one of the things that I identified with was that is the idea of sort of being isolated. When you have this thing that's kind of eating away at you, and you see people doing things and they're doing them wrong, or you just want to speak up on something, just to be fair. And a lot of times, fear shuts us down because we have this concern that, well, if I step out, I'm going to get in trouble. My job will be on the line, which it was in your case, unfortunately. I'm going to be labeled, as a troublemaker, and it's almost as if listening to your conscience can be a dangerous thing. But it's interesting how that just contradicts what a judge is supposed to do. I mean, a judge is supposed to have a conscience, right? And so when I saw you going through that, I said, you know what? I know what it's like to be isolated like that. And I said, I went through that, when I was dealing with some stuff, and back when I worked at Syracuse University, and I don't think other people should have to go through that. And so I want everybody watching, I just want to encourage you to not be afraid of your conscience. I just really think that when you follow your conscience and you go out there, and sometimes you're jumping in the middle of the fire, um, 9 times out of 10, I have found that I never regret it. I've never regretted standing up and doing the right thing. Even when my worst nightmare came to fruition. Like for example, when I was a professor, what happened with me is, or people like me, is you get blackballed. The other universities don't want to hire you, stuff like that, and that did happen with me. I couldn't find the jobs that I was qualified for, stuff like that, but I found a way to be okay. And in fact, I'm actually in a better position in my life than I would have been had I remained quiet and just went along with the program. The only difference is that in that situation, my insides would be eating away at me because I would literally get up every day doing something that I knew was wrong. Not speaking up on something that I knew needed to, where I needed to have a voice. So I encourage people to have this courage, and we'll support you. And so Judge Stevens, it was my pleasure to have you back on this, and this is not the end. In the future, I'm looking forward. I'm looking forward to seeing what a guy does with his career when he's elected, as a when he's appointed then elected as a judge at such an early age. I just have forgive me, but I have a hard time imagining a future where bigger things aren't in store for you. But I'll let you tell us about that when you're ready.
Well, I tell you, I never thought I'd be a traditional politician. I ran for judge because I wanted to be a judge, and I had to run for it. And so we did a nice job with that. And I owe a great deal of credit to my wife, who
Yes.
and she's a doctor, she's a radiologist, but she's just a wonderful woman and a wonderful partner, life partner for me. And I owe a great deal to her and her efforts in everything, particularly over the last month with all this stuff going on. But I want to say, boys, before we end, I feel compelled to at least address it. The elephant really in the room is this idea, the Facebook post, okay, and I can't talk about that. That's an issue I can't talk about. But I'll say that um, there was a reason that I spoke, and people are fixated. Some people on the medium of my speech and not the content. Um, there was a reason that I addressed this, and I talked about it just a few minutes ago because I believe that this issue is so vital to what we do. It is essential. It is the most important thing that we are facing right now. And if we're talking about justice, and we're talking about fairness, and we're talking about inclusion, and we're talking about equality, um, then we have to address the glaring problems in our criminal justice system. And the most glaring problem is the lack of diversity, the in in many cases the improper racial composition of our juries. It is destroying the public's confidence in what we do, and that's why I felt the need to address it. And I I'm going to keep addressing it in this way, in a general way, and I'm going to do it in a way that does not compromise my role as a circuit judge.
All right. Well, I love it, and who knows? Maybe one day we'll live in a world where people don't think it's crazy to post something on Facebook. You know, there's about $1 trillion a year in business being done in social media. So, in all kinds of political movements and just I mean, social media is the preferred method of communication for corporations around the world and all kinds of stuff. So, the idea that social media would somehow have that stigma really says that maybe we need to sort of redefine, how we go about communicating in the judicial system. I've never seen anything wrong with doing a Facebook post that's well thought out and responsible, as yours were. By the way, I want everybody to also know that I met Judge Stevens' wife, Ramonda, and she's not just a doctor and a Spelman graduate. She's also a part-time soldier and a part-time Harriet Tubman. And she was out there, and she really showed and exemplified that standing next to every strong black man is a strong black woman, and she certainly fits the mold. So I have to give a quick shout out to Ramonda, Dr. Stevens, for all the great work that she did. I'm going to let you get back to your night, Judge Stevens. It was an honor and a pleasure to speak to you, man. It was great.
Honor and my pleasure, boys. I look forward to getting together again. And like you said, this is not, people are saying, hey, it's over. You got your job back. And I said, look, I set out just to have my job. I mean, I could have just stayed quiet and kept my job. I'm speaking to something, and we're still having to address that. So I'm sure that we will talk plenty of times, and we will continue this fight to address this glaring issue in our criminal justice system. And I again thank you for your interest. I cannot say enough. I am appreciative. I am talking to you as Circuit Judge Olu Stevens in large part because of Boyce Watkins and the efforts that you made on my behalf, and I'm eternally grateful for everything that you have done.
Well, thank you. I'm so humbled to hear that. So humbled. And also those of you out there who were fighting, who supported what was going on in support of this issue. Thank you as well. People from all over the world, as far as China and Australia, were reaching out to show support. So this is what happens when we stick together. This isn't about beating up on anybody or bullying anybody. It's about just fighting for the right thing. We have to fight to protect our community and support each other, and that's the bottom line here. Judge Stevens, thanks again, and everybody who's watching. This is Judge Olu Stevens out of Louisville, Kentucky. I encourage you to go Google his case in case you haven't had a chance to follow the particulars of it. Also, Google his background. If you have a son or a daughter and you want to see just what success and what dignity looks like, just look at this man's track record. Look at what he's done with his life, because we don't want just one Judge Olu Stevens fighting a battle all by himself. We want 100,000 of them, and we have the ability to produce that. So, everybody, I'll let you guys have a good night, and until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.